Good evening. My name is Crispian Lees. I'm the Head of Education at Advantage Learn. And essentially, the webinar this evening is to help all of you to navigate this thing called the National Benchmark Tests. All right, so we'll get into that in a little bit. But for now, I just want to give you a little brief overview on who Advantage Learn is. We're an educational organization that was founded out of Durban, South Africa, but we are largely online and have a presence all over the country. And we help high school learners with self-study resources in maths and science. We run a significant number of courses in further studies, which were previously known as advanced programs. They've been renamed as further studies now. So previously AP Maths, AP Physics, and AP English. We run courses for learners across the country in further studies Maths, further studies Physics, and further studies English. We help learners in exam preparation, largely in the STEM subjects, so science, maths, life sciences, and accounting. And then we have an annual program where we help learners in their core maths and their core physical science to take their performance to the next level. And that's in our Maths Academy and our Science Academy, which is in grade 10 to 12 in maths and grade 11 and 12 in science. But a big thing that we do that we help learners with is with national benchmark test preparation. But this evening, I'm going to focus more on what the national benchmark test is all about and help you to navigate this thing. So I'll start off just by explaining what are the national benchmark tests. I'll then move on to who needs to write the NBTs and why they are important. And then lastly, I'll touch a little bit on how you can prepare for the national benchmark tests. All right, so let's dive straight into it then with what are the national benchmark tests? So the national benchmark tests are administered out of a research group at UCT, the Center for Educational Assessments, and they set up a project, the National Benchmark Test Project, which was actually commissioned by Higher Education South Africa in 2008. Essentially, Higher Education South Africa, which is a governing structure above the tertiary institutions in South Africa, recognized that they were needing to support learners moving into university in an increasing fashion and in different ways. And in order to do that effectively, they needed to understand learning profiles of those learners that were entering into tertiary studies so that they could gear these supportive programs to be as supportive as possible. And so they recognized that the National Senior Certificate, the matric certificate, wasn't necessarily giving them enough information in terms of the applicants towards universities. And so they commissioned the National Benchmark Test Project to try and collect more information about the profile of learners that were entering university and how they could be better supported at university to succeed. And so that's how the national benchmark tests came about. Ever since 2008, when they were commissioned by Higher Education South Africa, the adoption of the national benchmark tests across the universities in South Africa steadily increased as universities recognized the value of the information that these tests were giving them in terms of gearing supportive programs to support learners to succeed at a university level. But they also started to recognize that these tests were exceptionally helpful in terms of making placement decisions into various universities and various degree programs. And so while fundamentally they are a set of tests used to assess academic readiness for tertiary study, they can be used as a placement assessment in a similar way to the way that the SATs are used in the United States. And so that's essentially how the national benchmark tests came about and what their underlying purpose is. In terms of the actual tests, there are two tests in the national benchmark tests, and that is the AQL test and the MAT test. And I'm going to talk to those now in a bit more detail. So the first test, which is the compulsory test if you need to write the national benchmark tests, is the AQL test. And that stands for academic and quantitative literacy. Okay, so this is a single test that assesses two distinct domains, academic literacy and quantitative literacy. So in this test, under academic literacy, learners' language ability is assessed. Essentially, they're assessing in the test, they're looking at how you demonstrate your ability to read, understand, and communicate meaning from a body of text. So it is a language component to the test. While the quantitative literacy domain, that is a mathematical component to the test that is somewhat similar to mathematical literacy at a school level. So it's very much functional mathematics that is being assessed in the quantitative literacy component of the test. So be clear that the AQL test is not an English test. It's not only an English test. It's a language test, and it is a mathematical test in one. But the maths that you can expect is more similar to mathematical literacy than it is to core mathematics at a school level. And significantly, in this test and in both tests, no calculators are allowed. And that's a significant stumbling block for learners that undertake the national benchmark test, because many learners are very reliant on their calculators in whatever form of maths that they are doing. The question style it's a standardized assessment, which is administered by a multiple choice. And essentially what these questions can include is questions on grammar, punctuation, vocabulary, among other subdomains that are tested in the academic literacy component, and then very much numerical application questions via the quantitative literacy component. All right, so that's the AQL test. The second test is the MAT test, which is the maths test. It's a mathematics test. The MAT test is closely related to core mathematics, and it tests a student's ability to apply their knowledge. As with the AQL test, it is a standardized assessment via multiple choice, and learners will need to demonstrate understanding of mathematical concepts. And similarly, no calculators are allowed, which is a massive hurdle for learners in the test. So as I mentioned, the NBTs are comprised of two assessments, the AQL test and the MAT test. The AQL test is academic literacy and quantitative literacy, language and maths, and the MAT test is only maths. If you need to write the NBTs, as I mentioned previously, the AQL test is compulsory. The MAT test is only required for specific degree programs like your sciences, engineering, health sciences. Generally, the degree programs that have a large mathematical component to their program, so you need to have a strong mathematical ability in those degree programs, or generally the degree programs that are highly competitive to get into, like medicine, for instance, because the admissions departments for those degrees need as much information as possible to make the best admissions decisions that they can. So generally, the highly competitive degree programs will also require the MAT test. Does the NBT have a higher weighting than your actual matric certificate? So who needs to write the NBTs? As a generalization, most grade 12s applying for tertiary study in South Africa, as well as learners looking to enter competitive degree programs and or scholarship programs, will likely need to write the national benchmark tests. But the reality is that the requirements differ from university to university, and then they differ within the university between the degree programs as well. So there isn't a simple answer to, do I need to write the national benchmark tests? And so let me give a bit of a framework to you to guide you in navigating this question. As a learner looking to apply to study at university next year, this is the process that I would recommend that you undertake. You list out 3 degree programs that you can see yourself studying at a tertiary level, and you list out 3 universities that you can see yourself going towards, that you would apply towards. You then need to look at each of those universities, and within each of those universities, you need to look at those degree programs, your first choice, second choice, and third choice degree program, and see if any of those require the national benchmark tests for admission. If any one of those 9 combinations requires you to write the national benchmark test, then we strongly advise that you write the national benchmark tests. Also, if you are unsure of what you want to study beyond university, we also strongly advise that you write the national benchmark test, because when you then gain the clarity that you need for what you want to study beyond university, you might find at that point that you do need the national benchmark tests. And we maintain that that you will achieve your best results in the national benchmark test in your matric year. So if, for instance, you're considering taking a gap year, which is something I did, the reality is you'll probably achieve the best NBT result in your matric year rather than waiting to do it during your gap year when you haven't been working with the maths or the language that readily, and so the concepts have drifted away from you slightly. So does every applicant to university have to do the various tests? No, not every applicant does, but most do. UCT, for instance, requires the national benchmark test across the board for all faculties and all degree programs, with the exception of engineering and the built environment. The University of the Free State requires all first-year applicants to write the national benchmark test, as does Rhodes University. And the requirements differ across the country, and so you need to do your research essentially. Fortunately, we've done some hard yards and we've got some resources, which I'll share with you in a moment, which are going to help you on that path. Okay. But the key takeaway in terms of who needs to write the national benchmark test is you need to do your due diligence in terms of what universities you're applying to and what degree programs you're applying to. And the advice is that you can't bank on the fact that you'll get into your first choice university and your first choice degree program. We advise that you look across 3 universities and 3 degree programs and check the requirements in that regard. Okay. To the question, does the NBT have a higher weighting than your actual matric certificate? Great question. No, it doesn't. Think of it as a series of requirements that the admissions department will look at. The primary requirement for admission into university remains your matric certificate. That is important. That is exceptionally important. You need to achieve the right results in the right subjects to get you into the degree program that you're applying toward. But for universities and degree programs that quote the national benchmark test as a requirement for admission, you also need to write the national benchmark test. And you may need to score above a certain result in order to be admitted or into that degree program. So the NBT does not have a higher weighting than the matric certificate. The matric certificate is the primary mechanism for admission into university. The NBT may be a parallel requirement, and in which case you need both, or it might be a bit of a secondary requirement in terms of admission. Okay, so it doesn't have a higher weighting than the matric certificate. All right, so to get on to why you need to prepare for the national benchmark tests. At Advantage Learn, we were the first educational organization in South Africa to help learners to prepare for the national benchmark tests. There was a huge amount of anxiety around these tests. Lots of learners were doing very badly in the tests. And so we started developing preparation courses for learners to help them in their national benchmark tests. And there's a number of reasons why we strongly believe that learners need to prepare. First of all, they are a very unique assessment. They're very different to what learners are used to. They're multiple choice. Back when I was at school, and I know I validated with the learners in my class on an annual basis, the only time I encountered multiple choice questions was the first 5 or 10 questions of my physical science exam. That was always multiple choice. And that's the only time I saw multiple choice at school. And multiple choice is very different. It's right or it's wrong. There's no part marks. There's no marks for working. And so that in itself is very unique and different. And while there is a difficulty in that there's no part marks, you can't get working marks. It's all about getting the right answer. There's also an opportunity in that because there's strategies that you can employ in multiple choice type assessments that are a little bit more alternative and lateral, process of elimination, estimation, those kinds of things. And equipping learners with those skills is going to help them to perform better in the tests. Coming back to the part marks, it's an interesting exercise if you as a learner go and look at your last maths test that you did, and you look at all of the questions that you answered, and then look at which questions you got 5 out of 5 for, or 4 out of 4 for. Any question that you got 3 out of 5, or 1 out of 4, or you got part marks because you got working marks, consider disregarding those marks and then recalculating what you actually scored on that test. And it paints quite a different picture. So it's all about accuracy, but it is multiple choice. And so there's an opportunity in that. The other major thing and why learners need to prepare is because of the mathematical component to these assessments without the use of a calculator. This is something that is a significant challenge to our high school learners who largely throughout their high school careers are able to use the calculator very prevalently. And so they lose their skills of arithmetic, they lose their powers of estimation and all of those things. And so if they don't have a calculator, it is a massive stumbling block. So it's an aspect that learners need to prepare for. But the major reason why we really encourage learners to prepare for the NBTs is that the results can affect their future, and that if it is a requirement for the degree program of their choice, well, they need to give themselves the best chance to score the best results so that they can, again, have the best chance of being admitted into the degree program that they're aspiring towards, which is the stepping stone towards the career that they're in. The reason why the NBTs are important is because the reality is that competition to get into the tertiary institutions in South Africa is significant and growing. There are only so many universities in the country, and there are thousands of more learners, hundreds of thousands of more learners that are aiming to get into those institutions. And so having a competitive national benchmark test score on your application is going to increase your chances of admission. You must also take note that more and more institutions required to be written before the application date for that course closes. So when you are looking at your NBT requirements, not only do you need to identify whether or not you need to write the NBTs and then which of the tests you need to write, just the AQL or both the AQL and the MAT. You also need to take note if they give a deadline by which you need to have written the tests, because that is sometimes quoted as well. So take note of that. For instance, for very competitive degree programs where the admissions process takes a long time, they largely recommend that learners write the tests before the end of July so that the admissions department can start doing their work of sorting through all the applications. But the major highlight in terms of the NBTs is that it has varying degrees of importance per university and per department. All right. And so because it is such a challenging landscape to navigate, we've done some hard yards this year in researching the various universities and understanding their admissions requirements relative to the NBTs. And so Michaela will post a link in the chat to that summary of requirements that we formulated, and you can use that as a basis to help you to understand your requirements. The requirements that universities have for admission into their various degree programs are largely housed in their undergraduate prospectus. And for learners that are applying to be admitted in 2023, so have their first year of university in 2023, the prospectus that you're looking for is the 2023 undergraduate prospectus or the 2023 undergraduate guide. That is what holds the entrance requirements. We've linked via the document that I see Michaela has just shared in the chat to the horse's mouth in terms of the requirement, those undergraduate prospecti. And so that will really help you to get started in understanding your requirements. In terms of how you can prepare for the national benchmark tests, as I've mentioned repetitively, do your research. Requirements are different for everyone. Get to know more about the NBT by joining the webinar this evening. You've already taken a step towards understanding the NBTs better. There's another fantastic resource that we're really excited to actually be announcing for the first time on a webinar, is that we have launched a free app which is available on the Apple iStore and the Google Play Store. So for Apple, for iOS devices and for Android devices. And that free application, which is largely based around UCT's NBT requirements, you will be able to select the degree that you're thinking of applying towards, and it will tell you what your guaranteed admission requirements are. So UCT have this interesting thing where they actually, in their prospectus, they quote guaranteed admission requirements. So these are things that if you hit those parameters, like a certain result in maths, a certain result in science, a certain result on your NBTs, then essentially they're saying you will be guaranteed admission into that degree program. And so the app is formulated around those requirements. And that's a really nice and easy way to figure out what your requirements are, whether you need the NBTs, and then what score you should be aiming for. And over and above that, we've embedded our free quiz into the app where learners can actually try some MAT questions and try some AQL questions and see how they do to then understand their readiness. So the app is all about understanding your requirements, benchmarking your readiness for the national benchmark tests, and then accessing more information. And we have a wealth of knowledge on advantagelearn.com that you can work through. Another simple thing that you can do to prepare for the national benchmark tests is work hard and apply yourself to your school mathematics and your school home language subject, because that speaks to the academic literacy component. So by applying yourselves in those lessons, it's undoubtedly going to help. For academic literacy, reading and engaging with a lot of texts is undoubtedly going to help. And in your math subject, I really encourage all learners to put your calculator away. Only take it out when you absolutely need it, because there are instances where you absolutely need your calculator. I can't tell you what tan or 40 degrees is without a calculator, and I doubt there are many people who can. But flex your muscle of arithmetic, flex your muscle of estimation by not relying too heavily on your calculator. At Advantage Learn, we then run a number of preparation courses to help learners to prepare for the national benchmark tests. We run them in person, live online, and we have some self-study options available for both MAT and AQL. And they're available in English and Afrikaans. And within those courses, learners get access to our repository of mock tests, where learners can actually try NBT style tests to understand how they are doing. And you have access to a bank of questions that can really prepare you well for your national benchmark tests. We also have support via our website where you can engage with our team, you can engage with our educators if you have content related questions, and we will help you in that regard. In terms of those courses, they run as workshops or as online courses. Our workshops are in person or live online. The in-person workshops are in all the major metros in South Africa, but we also do the workshops live online, so learners can join them from anywhere in the country. And that essentially gives you face time with an educator for your maths and AQL preparation. It includes access to the mock tests, a full NBT preparation workbook, which we work through in the workshop together, face time with an expert educator. The workshops are available in English, and those are at a set date and time. The online course, these enable you to define your individualized study schedule for your maths and AQL preparation. So these are more classic online courses where we have essentially produced video lessons for the NBT preparation course, and then learners have access to that online course and can work through the preparation at their own pace and at a time that suits them. Learners receive 12 months access to that and are equally supported online, and also get access to the mock tests that are available via those courses. There is the pricing for our NBT preparation courses, and this is all available via our website, advantagelearn.com. And in order to book, you simply visit advantagelearn.com, navigate to our NBT preparation page. You'll see the catalog of courses that are available to you, select the course that makes sense for you, and essentially register to get involved. We then also have a premium pass for parents and learners that are finding navigating the national benchmark tests too time consuming or a little bit overwhelming and want a high degree of guidance in that regard. So via our premium pass, learners get access to unlimited maths and AQL live streams. They can attend any live stream workshop and as many of them as they like until they feel prepared. And via the premium pass, learners and parents get access to a dedicated NBT guide who will understand what you're planning on studying towards, what you're planning on applying towards, when you're planning on writing the test, and help you kind of structure your preparation towards that point. Okay, I've already spoken about the app. It's a really exciting launch that we launched. Sheesh, I think it was this week or it was last week. I can't recall. We've been working furiously to get this ready to help learners, and we're really excited to announce the NBT Prep App, which you can download on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And as I mentioned, that will really help you in a very quick way to understand your requirements, benchmark your readiness, and access more information that you might need for the national benchmark tests. All right, so I think that's everything that we planned on sharing with you this evening. So I'm going to open the floor. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat or in the Q&A. You can equally raise your hand and we'll open your voice channel and we can have a bit of a conversation. The results are marked pretty quickly. I imagine it's not much longer than a month. When the scores are released, the learners will, of course, get their marks for the tests, but the learners don't have to submit their marks to the universities that they are applying towards. The university that requires the NBT score will directly get the applicant's NBT score from the National Benchmark Test Project. So learners don't actually have to submit NBT test certificate or anything like that. They just need to make sure that they've written by the time that they need to write, and then the score will be available, and the universities that need the score will then get the score from the National Benchmark Test Project. So that actually speaks to the first frequently asked question that we have here, and I'll chat through some of these frequently asked questions before we close, and as other questions might come up via the various channels. In terms of cost for the NBTs, I always forget this as well, but I think it's in the region of 130 Rand per test, 260 Rand for both tests. Where can I write the NBT test? That's a really good question. The test can be written in person at testing centers across the country, which are available on the administrating organization's website. So that's one thing I must also highlight. AdvantageLearn.com, we help learners to prepare for the tests. We do not administer the tests. In order to book for the tests, you go to nbt.ac.za, which Michaela will post in the chat as well. That is the administrating organization of the test. And on their website, you will find all of the dates when the tests are running. The first test was in the middle of May, the first online test, and they run all the way from May till actually to early next year, January, roughly every weekend. And there are opportunities to write in person across the country, and there are opportunities to write the test online as well. The administrating organization have developed the competency for reliable online proctored assessments, accelerated by the pandemic, but learners are able to take the test in person or online, whatever mode they find more suitable. And then in terms of who typically needs to sit the MAT test, I did touch on that during the presentation, but it is largely the degree programs that have a large mathematical component to them. So engineering, your commerce degrees, your Bachelor of Science degrees. If there's a lot of maths in the degree program, it's highly likely that you'll need to write the math test because the university will want to assess your mathematical ability, which will be an indicator of your probability of success in that degree program. But then also the highly competitive degree programs, like medicine, for instance, where there isn't that much maths in the degree, but the additional test gives them an additional sorting criterion around which to make the best admission decision. Because ultimately, the university wants to provide fair access to tertiary study and admit the learners that have the highest probability of succeeding in those degree programs. That's what they want to do. Is the AQL paper divided 50-50 with English and maths literacy, or was one more weighted than the other? Good question. It is roughly 50-50 between academic literacy and quantitative literacy, roughly, but not perfectly. But it's a good estimation. So here are those useful links again. NBT website to book your test is nbt.ac.za. If you need help preparing, that's advantagelearn.com. You can simply visit advantagelearn.com/NBT. And Michaela already shared the university requirements doc in the chat, but all of that information is also available via the app. Megan is asking, what is in the workbook received at the in-person workshops? So in the workbook is the material that we cover in the workshop, which covers key concepts that are tested on in the tests, the theory related to that, and then worked examples that we work through, as well as additional practice examples for you to cover outside of the workshop. If you found this webinar helpful and you want to keep abreast with information from Advantage Learn, the best way to do that is to sign up to our mailer. There's a way to sign up via our website, but I think Michaela also has a fancy link that she's going to share to you that you can sign up for our mailer via in the chat. So if you'd like to keep up to date with information from Advantage Learn, please sign up for our mailer. If you want to join us for our next webinar, we're doing a webinar next week, which is our first alumni webinar where we're inviting back some of our distinguished alumni from our further studies programs who will be talking to us about their journey to their careers and how further studies impacted that. So that's next week. Thursday, 2nd of June from 5:30 to 6:30. You can register via that link, and Michaela will also drop that in the chat if you want to sign up for that webinar directly. So that is everything from our side. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope you found the information helpful and you now understand a little bit better this complex landscape of the national benchmark tests. If you have any further questions, of course, ask me now or get in touch with us at advantagelearn.com. And from our side, just everything of the best in your matric year, likely. And as you navigate the national benchmark tests, it is a hectic year, but do your best. That's all anyone can ever ask of you. And yeah, good luck with the national benchmark tests.